Hello, it is Jack Gill and welcome back to Redmen Academy. We've not had a video for a couple of weeks. Me and James have been quite busy, but we are back and we are back with the youth show. And big news, the youth show will now be available on the YouTube. It won't just be for members of the redmentv.com at all, subscribers of the website. But nonetheless, do make sure you go to the website and subscribe. James, there's a lot to talk about today. I'm so happy to have the U Show back. But first of all, mate, how you been?
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, enjoying the lovely, rainy, stormy weather here in Wales. It's flooding everywhere. It's absolutely miserable. What about you?
A Welshman with an Irish top on. Nice. Good stuff. But yeah, I've not been too bad. I've been away the last week or so, hence the lack of content. But I'm back. I'm ready. We've got the Community Shield coming up as well, which should be good, and then an international break, and then the season will be starting. It's been a weird pre-season, but I can't wait for the new season to start. But yeah, as I mentioned, we've got so much to talk about today. This youth show is going to be broadcast now every week in two parts. We're going to do the first part, which will always be a Liverpool-based part, and then the second part will be the wider league and Europe and more talking points outside Liverpool Football Club. But to kick off part one, James, we'll start with sort of a roundup from last season. Trent Alexander-Arnold winning Young Player of the Year in the Premier League, and Curtis Jones, of course, was crowned as Premier League 2 Player of the Season. A fantastic season for them both, James.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, I think we knew Trent was going to win it. You know, there obviously was quite stiff competition, but, you know, he bettered his assists record, you know, obviously getting 13 this season in the league. It's unheard of for a defender, and he's continually defying expectations. And, you know, same for Curtis Jones as well. I wasn't expecting him to win the award. You know, he's had a very good seasons, you know, been in double digits for goals and assists in, you know, not many games really. But there have been so many standout players in the Premier League too that it adds to the award all the more, the fact that there were so many good players.
Yeah, I think we'll start with the Curtis Jones one, James. I think in terms of Curtis Jones and his season, he's been the model youngster, really, and a lot of young lads can, not just at Liverpool, across the Premier League and across Europe, can look at Curtis Jones and what he's done this season. You know, we talk constantly about that FA Cup appearance against Wolves a couple of years ago. Where he looks out of place. He didn't look ready. There were rumours for him to go out on loan at the start of last summer, but instead he wanted to stay at Liverpool. He was made captain of the under-23s, and he started brilliantly, and he had a fantastic season. He got moved up to the first team. When he was in the under-23s, he'd always score or assist. He'd always be the main man for them. And then he ended the season by getting a Premier League medal, by getting enough appearances in the Premier League for Liverpool's first team to get a medal, and you know, I think it was an outstanding season for Curtis Jones, and he absolutely deserved that award. You know, there were other players that could have got it. Florian Balogun, who we'll talk about in part two, was a player who I think maybe could have got the award as well. But you know, I think Curtis Jones has led by example in that league this season, and has shown exactly what that league is for, and it's about creating a stepping stone from academy football and academy level football to the first team, and Curtis Jones has done that fantastically this season.
Yeah, he's the prototype for what you want to see in a breakout player, you know, doing the job week in, week out at youth level, and then when being called up to the first team, knowing exactly what to do and doing the right things in the right moments, and ultimately getting rewarded for it in the end. He's going to be the player that you should be looking up to when you're looking to break into the second team and then look on further into the first team, because he's done all the right things. And it's, you know, it's brilliant that he's been recognised for that.
Yeah, I mean, you see him now in pre-season for Liverpool looking outstanding. I think he was brilliant against Stuttgart, and again, he looked good against Salzburg. But, you know, for me, it's one of them where he started last season. He was an academy player, rumours to go out on loan. Not too many people thinking he has a future at the club. He has a fantastic season, and now he's replaced Adam Lallana, a long servant at the club, who's moved on as a free agent to Brighton, and there we have Curtis Jones, ready-made replacement for him, ready to go in the first team, and it's just a fantastic season. And as I say, as you refer to there, he really is the prototype now for other young players to lead by his example, and you never know who will be next. But yeah, as for Trent, we'll go back to him. Trent, another fantastic season, breaking his own assist record. I don't think there's any doubt right now that he is the best right back in the world. a lot of people don't like his style, James. A lot of people don't like how he's not the natural sort of right back, how he's very attacking. Everyone knows the way Trent Alexander-Arnold plays. But, he's a fantastic player, and he's that new breed of right back that I am so fond of, and he does it so brilliantly.
It's the people that don't like Trent being a natural right back, the same people who don't rate Firmino for being a natural striker. He's good at what he does, and he's found that niche in the team where he can use his strengths and use them very well. His 4 goals and 13 assists, many of which come from set piece or dead ball situations, are a testament to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think nobody questioned Trent winning that award. It was absolutely deserved. Another phenomenal season by him. To look at his season as a whole, I think his performance against Leicester at the King Power Stadium was one of the best individual performances of the season by anyone in the Premier League. I think it was a fantastic display from Trent. He was outstanding that day. It just shows what he can do, James. It's not the first time, and it won't be the last that he produces a performance like that at such a young age, and because of his style. I think although there's a lot of people that realise that he is the best right back in the world, he is also criminally underrated by many in terms of his defensive ability. He may be stronger going forward as an attacking sense, but he's still a very, very good right back defensively as well, I think. And yes, there are shaky moments, as every player has, as every young player has. But he is a phenomenal right back, and there is so much more to come. And I am so excited about the future of Trent Alexander-Arnold. And I saw this question on Twitter the other day, James, and it's a big question for everyone, really, in terms of actually Gary Neville is probably the only right back that's maybe better than Trent in his whole time in the Premier League. There are other right backs, of course, who have had a lot longer in the Premier League. You look at Branislav Ivanovic than Trent, but has Trent overtook him already? Be interesting to see what the comments think about that. But for me, I think there's only Gary Neville really that you could talk about right backs that are better than Trent of all time in the Premier League. What do you make of that, James?
I mean, he's performed at the highest level consistently now for 2.5 years, and he's not looking like he's going to be slowing down anytime soon. And it's not just he's had a lot of highs, but it's been sustained. And you don't have an on-off season inconsistent and get 12 then 13 assists successively. And we've seen how good he is, and we know that if he continues like this, he's going to be considered the best right back in arguably Liverpool's history, Premier League history. And whether he stays at right back position or not, he will still be seen as a playmaker in the future, because I think he's defying expectations when you look at a player like him.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I'm showing my age there saying that, but for me, definitely in my age bracket, I can only think of Gary Neville better right backs than Trent. I mean, I'm also putting Trent's age into it, and the fact that I think he's going to be at Liverpool obviously his whole career. And as you say, as he's performed consistently for this period of time, I don't think he's going to slow down at all. And there are questions about whether long term he moves to central midfield. Who really knows? But right now, I think he is one of the best right backs that we've ever seen in the Premier League. So yeah, that's fantastic news. Moving on to another right back, James, and this is something that we've anticipated for a long time. Neco Williams has got his call up to the Welsh first team. And James, you can't argue with it at all. It's absolutely deserved, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was having this conversation, I think 3 days ago before it was announced, with my girlfriend's Welsh cousin. He was saying, do I think that he'll get into that Euro team? And I said, to be honest, if he gets into these next couple of friendly teams, then there's absolutely no doubt that he'll go to the Euros, because based on pure quality, he's up there. He's Connor Roberts, very good player, but Neco Williams has that something different, and he's got that hunger, he's got that desire to want to push and not stop pushing. I'm really glad that he's decided to go with Wales rather than go with England, because he could have had a decent international career potentially with England, but he wouldn't have got those consistent minutes that a player of his caliber needs. And I think he can be that next generation of players breaking through now.
Yeah, Trent, of course, injured as well, and he's going off on international duty after Community Shield. So I think that Neco Williams will most likely start the Community Shield as well. So it'd be good to see him there. I think he'll get a lot more minutes as well this season. I think he'll be cemented as more of a first team player, to be honest. He is now the understudy to Alexander-Arnold, and when we need him, we'll call upon him, of course. But yeah, he's had a fantastic season. I mention all the time. Every time he pulls on that Liverpool shirt, he seems to perform better and better and better and better and better. He's improving every single time we watch him. He got more minutes as obviously the season drew to a close and got his medal. Of course, he was a lad who. After the restart, he played a lot of football. I think when he came off from the bench for a couple of times just after the restart, he really, really impressed, earned himself a few starts, and looked very good. We tried him in the left back position, of course, but I think it confirmed really that he was more of a right back and better at right back and better being just Trent's understudy. And of course, we then went and signed Tsimikas to be the understudy for Andy Robertson. But yeah, he absolutely deserves that call up, James. We spoke about it a lot from probably January. Really, we've been speaking about this and his chances of getting into the European Championship squad. I think, to agree with you, I think he absolutely will be in that squad. To be honest with you, I think he's now in this squad now for these friendlies coming up, and it'll be over to him really to impress. And cement himself as a regular in that Welsh squad, which I absolutely think he is capable of doing, because I think he's a brilliant player and a fantastic right back. And Wales really need a right back like him, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I think it's absolutely deserved, and fingers crossed he does well there and gets minutes for them too. We'll move on to some news now, James. We'll talk about, first of all, some players that have joined our academy squads. Javi Senden, a goalkeeper formerly at Villarreal, is currently training with the squad, which is interesting with all the goalkeepers we've got. Obviously, we've got Jaros, Orzinski, Ben Winterbottom. We've got a lot of goalkeepers. Yeah. Football club. You expect now, if Senden is coming in, does that mean Grabara will maybe move on permanently? Will Kelleher go out on loan? That's certainly what I think. Maybe both of them will be going out on loan, but I can't see both of them hanging around with all this, with this abundance of goalkeepers we've got at the minute. What do you make of it, James?
Yeah, it's a strange one, because it came out of the blue. I only saw it break a couple of days ago, and it wasn't really being widely reported. He was just appeared in a couple of photos, didn't he? But then I saw here that Goal have stated that he's been impressing, especially John Ochterberg's been impressing the staff, and they're considering offering him a contract. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out and how that affects the dynamic already at the club. Because obviously we released a couple of goalkeepers at the end of last season, and hopefully trimming down that position, because we did have an abundance of young lads looking to punch through. And whether Senden we brought in as more of just a training goalkeeper and the fourth choice for the senior team, it remains to be seen. But will that mean that we'll then move on Grabara and Kelleher? I'm not too sure. I think they're going to need first team minutes. We've seen how important that is for Grabara, and I think Kelleher needs that as well. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see.
Well, Grabara sort of communicated with us over Twitter, didn't he, at the start of last season about what he wants, and it was that he doesn't want to sit around and wait. He wants to be a first-team goalkeeper somewhere, and for that reason, you have to think he had a decent season at Huddersfield, of course, and it makes you think he most likely will move on, whether that's a permanent transfer, whether that's a loan. We don't know as yet. Kelleher, there were loads of rumours in January that he was wanted by clubs like Preston on loan. So it wouldn't surprise me if he does go on loan as well, and that Senden is used as a sort of third choice goalkeeper. We know that there was a few issues last year. We ended up signing Andy Lonergan as an emergency goalkeeper for us. So maybe it's cover for him. He's obviously gone now. We're not quite sure, but yeah, he's training. I think it's very likely that he signs for the club. Also in the last few days, 16-year-old attacking midfielder Malcolm Freundorf, a German youth player, has completed his transfer from Liverpool from Hoffenheim. I don't know too much about this lad, James, but I'm really interested. I read up some stuff on him. He looks like a very good youth player, and I think that actually it'll be good to follow his progress. I think he'll probably join the under-18s this season. It'll be interesting to see how he does for them.
Yeah, definitely. What I've seen has come through Maxi Angelo, friend of the show, and he said here that he's good identifying pressing triggers, which is very good for us. Intelligent on the ball. very good ball carrier as well. So he seems to be someone that we have clearly identified specifically and saw that he has certain traits that suit our style of play. Look into the future, whether he's someone that's going to be, more of a long-term development, or whether that's, it's been signed with view to it breaking through in a couple of years. We're not too sure yet. But for him to come in now and, seemingly out of the blue, it does show that, we are constantly working behind the scenes to look to be improving and look to be preparing for the future, beyond Jurgen Klopp.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's very important too. I think we've seen those, especially from last season, there's a lot of good youth players and young lads at this football club that we can be proud of, and actually we know that at the minute we've won our first Premier League title, of course, and now we want to sustain that and make sure we win many more, and the future is as important as now, so getting these good youngsters in is very important for this football club going forwards. Some more news, REFL Trophy Group, obviously we were in it last season, we were knocked out the group stage, but we're back in it this season, and our group has been confirmed. We are in a group with Wigan, Tranmere and Port Vale. Our first game in that, I believe, is against Wigan on the 22nd of September, and we'll follow all of that here on the Academy channel. It'll be good to see the young Reds back in action against some good sides there, James.
Yeah, definitely. It's competitive football as well. It's some of the only competitive football they might taste all season, and be tested against, more established lads is only going to do them, worlds of, help them on and, getting that experience against men. They're used to playing against these young teams and we know what they're capable of playing against fellow youngsters, but it's when you come against, seasoned professionals and, top class players that you learn what they're made of and you get to see where their areas of improvement are going to be and how you can then address that going forward to make sure that they make that step up to senior level.
Absolutely. And a bit more news, Ovie Ejaria is to join Reading permanently. We knew this was very likely, but there's been a lot over the last few weeks, James, a lot of rumours and murmurs that Reading was struggling financially with the COVID situation. However, it is now close to being confirmed. And for me, James, I think this is a steal for Reading. I really do. I think 3.5 million for Ovie Ejaria, which was, of course, inserted in his loan contract for last season. I think that was a steal for them. I think he's a fantastic player, and he's cemented himself as one of the best creative players, one of the best creative midfielders in the Championship.
Exactly, and if he can emulate that form going into next season, we saw with Eberici Eze for QPR how good a good ball carrying attacking midfielder is, who has that flair, who has that ability to pull off, ludicrous goals, ludicrous passes. He could completely emulate that, and we could be seeing next season him make that big move up to a London-based team in the Premier League, because it's not beyond him. He has time on his side where he can look to kick on, and hopefully we have got a sell-on clause in there because he's not going to be playing for Reading much longer, with all due respect.
Yeah, he does look like a fantastic young player, and he's looked brilliant at Reading all season. But yeah, to move on now to some friendlies, and our under-23s and under-18s have been in action over the last week or so. They've both played a game each. Let's start with the under-23s, James. Drew 2-2 with the new Saints of the Academy last Saturday. Paul Glatzel and Abdi Sheriff both marked their comebacks from injury with a goal. It's great news, that, isn't it, James? I know Paul Glatzel. Let's focus on him to start with. Paul Glatzel is a player admired by Jurgen Klopp. We heard him spoken of when he just came back from his injury, and Klopp mentioned him that only Glatzel hadn't come back to full training yet, which I thought was fantastic to hear, and shows exactly what Jurgen Klopp makes of this young lad. He had a fantastic season a couple of seasons ago alongside Bobby Duncan in our under-18s and helped us win the Youth Cup. I think it's going to be fantastic to see him for our under-23s this season, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah. We weren't too sure how he would step up to under-23 level. We knew how good he was at under-18. We know how good he is technically and what his ability is, but making that step up's big, especially after not playing for so long. But he's shown here that he can step up with ease and that he's still got that goal-scoring ability. And to do that against the new Saints, who are, a decent team by Welsh standards, shows that he's raring to go again. He's got that hunger to step up and potentially get some minutes in the cup, so if we have a similar situation in this coming season as we did last year.
And as for Joe Hardy and Liam Miller, what do you think it means for them now, James, with obviously Paul Glatzel back and firing? You expect him to be a regular starter for the under-23s. Do you see Liam Miller and Joe Hardy going out on loan maybe?
I mean, I I expect Liam Miller to go out permanently, but I think in the market nowadays, there's no point in selling someone when you know you can get more value next year. I think a loan, especially for Liam Miller, would make sense because he is still a developing lad. Whereas Joe Hardy, we know what he's good at. We know that he's a good poacher, and he could be someone useful to have around the team. You know, whilst we're still breaking in Leighton Stewart and seeing what he's made of and whether he's got that ability to step up. You need a decent deputy, and we saw last season when Brewster wasn't scoring that we did struggle, and we were playing Yas Larouci as a makeshift striker, that you need to have someone who can come into the team and score goals.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you there, mate. I think Liam Miller is a player that obviously before the pandemic we'd have probably looked to offload permanently this summer. But now, will his value have gone down? Probably. So maybe he gets another loan, hopefully to somewhere where he plays regular football, and then maybe moving him on next season. But it wouldn't shock me if he does move permanently anyway. But yeah, also Adi Sheriff back from injury with a goal. Good news, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good to see him. Saw him a few times at the academy when the under-23s were playing, same as under-18s, and we haven't seen too much of him at all over the last year, a bit more than that. But we know he's a good player. We know technically he's a very good lad, and we know he's got that ability to take the ball on past players and dribble. And it's a shame that he's missed so much football because he's clearly highly regarded at the club, and he's still one of the most exciting players there. And it'd be good to see, how he recovers from this injury now.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's going to be good. Hopefully, he can stay fit this season, so we can see a lot more of this young lad. Because, as you say, he's highly regarded. There's a lot of people that know he's a very, very good and exciting player, but we didn't get to see too much of him over the last year. So it's going to be very interesting to see how he gets on in the under-23s this season, like Paul Glatzel. And, our eyes are firmly with the under-23s now. A lot of people have moved up from there into being with the first team after last season, impressing then. So it's going to be interesting to see now these lads in the under-23s under Barry Lutis. They have a platform now. They know that they're capable of making it into the first team and getting first team appearances this season. It's going to be a very weird season in the Premier League, James. It's going to be very strange. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of rotation. There's not been that big of a pre-season. There's the Euros ahead. It's worrying. It's worrying times really for some clubs, but also it's good for young players coming through, knowing that they're more likely to get opportunities in the first team in the cup competitions, and maybe even getting bench time in the Premier League or travelling with the first team in this, that, and the other. But first, they've got to impress at youth level, haven't they?
Yeah, exactly. With Liverpool not really addressing the depth issues that we have yet, and we saw a lot of young lads travelling week in, week out, not necessarily making the bench, but in that travelling squad. And it wouldn't surprise me if we now saw some in the 23s make that step up and join the likes of Curtis Jones and Harvey Elliott, which then obviously brings on the conveyor belt of the young lads making that step up and getting to prove themselves at youth level. It's not ideal not having that depth, but at the same time it gives the opportunity and it gives that taste of first team action to those young lads, showing them that if they keep on working at youth level, what is within reach.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's just Liverpool who will have that issue though as well. I think it's lots of Premier League teams right now will have to have more faith in their youth this season, because they won't be able to constantly, with all the fixtures coming up and in a short space of time, I don't think they'll be able to, constantly rely on first team and rotation players in the cups and stuff like that. I think you're going to see a lot more of youth players getting game time in FA Cups, in obviously the Carabao Cup, and maybe even in the Premier League, James. So yeah, it's very interesting. It's going to be a very interesting season. To move on to the under-18s now, Leighton Stewart continued his fine form from last season. He netted a hat-trick as Liverpool beat Crewe Alexandra 5-0. But what was also interesting, James, was not just Leighton Stewart's performance. It was the performance of new 16-year-old Polish lad or wonder kid, Mateusz Musialowski. I hope I have pronounced that right.
That was really good.
Right, to be fair, but yeah, he looked very good. He came on off the bench, and I've seen his performance. He looks very, very good, James. He excited me, and he also made sure that I rehearsed pronouncing his name, because I feel as though I'm going to be saying it a lot this season.
Yeah, definitely. The more quality we add to that team, the stronger we're going to be next season. It's brilliant because we can watch these young lads develop in front of us, and it's adding the competition to the team, replacing the lads who will be stepping up. and ensuring that the level doesn't drop. Typical. You lose players. We saw it in the 23 level. The more players we were losing to the first team, that drop off was huge. But now, as we're looking to bring in lads from abroad and around the country, we're making sure that the youth teams are just as competitive as the first team, and that we look to attack on all fronts. And attracting the best talent is integral to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really excited again for what's hopefully another good season for the under-18. Maybe they can push that side again. A new manager, of course, and Leighton Stewart looks to be continuing his incredible form. So hopefully he can continue that into the next season and maybe bring some silverware home for Liverpool's under-18s. Before we go, I think we have to talk about the centre-back discussion at this football club right now, James. Ben White is close to agreeing a new long-term contract with Brighton, reportedly. So maybe we have to rule him out from signing as our fourth-choice centre-back. Now we know Dejan Lovren has joined Zenit St. Petersburg, of course. Over the last few days, there have been murmurs for Celtic's Christopher Asia, which I think is interesting. With them being knocked out of the Champions League as well, does that make it easier for us to sign him? He's part of, he's a Norwegian young lad, part of that brilliant sort of group coming through with the Norwegians at the minute. There's that sort of age group, isn't there, where there's lots and lots of talent for Norway right now. What do you make of all this, James?
I mean, a couple of years ago, I was really interested by the prospect of getting Aja, but as we've seen on Twitter recently, especially over the last few days, Celtic fans have been more than happy for him to leave, for the right price. They seem to think that he hasn't really progressed since arriving a couple of years ago. It's clear that he's got talent and he's got very raw abilities and he has the makings to be a top player, but just from what I've seen online, from what I've read from the fans, he's not really kicked on. He's not really become what they thought he'd be. And he's still got that potential, but I think letting him move on to a bigger team is something that they'd be willing to accept because they would be able to get a decent price for someone who's not necessarily their best player right now.
It could be a decent coup for us, though, James. He's a young Norwegian lad. There's plenty of potential in him. He's not impressed too much. But for me, when I first saw it, it was, it could be sort of a Van Dijk sort of coup. This where obviously I'm not comparing ability, where he's going to be as good as Van Dijk. Of course, I'm not saying that. But with Van Dijk, of course, he was at Celtic. He impressed there. He moved to Southampton, impressed there, and then Liverpool moved him on even further. And with Asia, I think he's a young lad. He can come in. He can learn from Gomez and Van Dijk and get better and better here. So if we can get it for the right price, I wouldn't be against it at all. And as fourth choice centre back, I think there's a lot worse that we could get. And it's a young lad. And I've always thought throughout talking about this that we were linked to players like Betis' Mandy and other centre halves, but I always thought we may as well buy young and get a young centre back. If we're going to bring someone in, we may as well get a young lad on a decent sort of deal that can learn and that can get better and progress as a fourth choice centre back at Liverpool. But yeah, there's another lad that we have to talk about in this discussion, and that is Billy Koumetio. He's a lad that I'm very, very impressed with, and I've been keeping my eye on for the last year or so. I went to watch him for Liverpool under-18s and the Barry Lutus against Man City earlier on in this season. I remember talking on the youth show behind the paywall about him and saying there wasn't an aerial duel that this man lost. Like, he literally won everything. Every corner was on his head. It was fantastic. He was absolutely outstanding, and he was a lad that I've watched closely ever since then. I think start of August he gets his professional contract, and now he's been very integral to Liverpool's Austrian training camp. Jurgen Klopp has held one-on-one individual training sessions with him. He's spoken highly of him. I think the plan now, James, is to put him in the under-23s with Barry Lutus. But I think Jurgen Klopp and his staff will be monitoring this lad very closely. He is a very, very good and a very, very exciting young centre-back, isn't he?
Yeah, definitely. He seems to be getting that fast-track treatment where, we wouldn't really have expected, this time last month that he would have been, such an integral part, as he said, to our pre-season camp, and yet here we are talking about him, about how he's having one-on-one sessions with the manager, how he's been given obviously that new contract too, and I think he has got all the makings to be a top defender. Whether this happens in the next year or so, or a year after that, there's no rush because he is only 17 years old. There's no need to rush him into that first team to address a need when we have got other lads capable. But it shows that we are planning for the future, and we have got someone who's going to be waiting in the wings and developing and training with those first team players to come into the side when he's needed and when it's ready.
Yeah, we know, of course, Morgan Boys has gone to Fleetwood on loan. But we have some very, very good young centre backs at this football club, James, and Koumetio will go in the in the under 23s now, where of course we've got Van den Berg, we've got Kijana Hoover. It's going to be very interesting to see him there. But yeah, I'm very, very excited by this youngster. I've been for a while. I think he can become an incredible centre back. I really, really do. But I think it's important we take our time on him. A lot of Liverpool fans have been impressed with his performance against Salzburg, and they have every right to. He's a very entertaining, very exciting young centre back. But I think he's still very young. He's still only 17. You don't put too much pressure on him. He's got so much time ahead of him. I think he will become an incredible centre half in the future, but I think it's important that we take our time with him and we let him progress naturally. But it's really exciting and really good news that Jurgen Klopp has been holding these one-on-ones and that he's very impressed with him. So that is fantastic news for us. But yeah, we'll leave that there for part one. Head over for part two if you want to listen to more in terms of the wider league and the youth stuff across the league. Thank you, James, for joining me. We will see you soon. Ta-ra.